I'm Chris Berg. Thanks for joining us. We're going to kick off tonight's show with a little round table debate. Joining us tonight, the Vice President of the People's Press Project, Cindy Gomez-Schempp. I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly. And backed by popular demand, the President of the North Dakota Tea Party Caucus, Leon Francis. To both of you, thank you very much for taking the time to be here. I want to talk about several different topics, some of the hot things that have been happening as of late. One thing that a lot of people are talking about in the media is the George Zimmerman trial. I want to talk about it in the context of racism in America. First black president ever. I think many people thought, hey, we're going to see a post-racist America. Cindy, this is for you. You look at the Zimmerman trial, look at the Paula Deen situation. Is racism almost even better than it's ever been before in this nation, or worse than ever?
Well, I think that it's kind of difficult to characterize it as either. You know, I think that we haven't really changed in terms of where we are with our racism. I think that we deal with it differently because, you know, like with the Paula Deen situation, I think it's kind of unfair or hypocritical of us to think, oh, well, there's nobody in my family that said something like that, or we don't know of anyone that does that. Let's crucify her. You know, that's kind of ridiculous because we all know that that's not true. You know, when we have Sebastián de la Cruz singing at an NBA game in a mariachi suit because he's very proud of his Mexican heritage, and people having all sorts of hateful things to say about a 10-year-old child. You know, the way that we're dealing with our underlying racism in this country, that's what I think is worse in a way, because we're not really talking about it genuinely. We're not dealing with the issues of racism. And then you have people like Paula Deen saying something that we know goes on all the time.
So you're saying the Food Network made a bad decision?
I'm not saying that they made a bad decision. I think that the way in which we're handling these kinds of discussions is bad. It's reactionary. It's stupid. It doesn't really reflect how we should be treating each other and how we should be talking about these things in America.
Speaking about that, and Lena, I'm kind of surprised I see your head shaking a lot here with Cindy, but I want to ask you more specifically, in the Zimmerman trial last week, Rachel Gentel, the African-American girl that was the last person to be on the phone with Trayvon Martin, hit the stand, didn't go real well for the prosecutors, but she also was beaten up from a stance of people saying, hey, she's uneducated, and I didn't necessarily see it that way. So I want to get your comments on how the media responded to her testimony in this trial as an African-American woman.
I don't know, she did come across to me as uneducated, but I don't see that as being, you know, a beat up on her. That's a systemic problem in our public education system. That's a family, breakdown of the family and society, and our society issue. You know, you get people from a certain segment of the population, that's what you get.
But let me ask you something. When you say she did come across as uneducated, she's from Haiti, your family is originally, so it's not like, from what I understand, English isn't necessarily her first language. If you look at the way she was rattling off dates, I mean, she was like, March 17th, yeah, that was a Friday. March 19th, so there was something there where you could see that the wheels were definitely turning. My question, I guess, is it more the media portrayal then of an African-American woman to say, hey, she sort of fits the quote-unquote bill of living in a poverty-stricken area, she's African-American, thus we can make these assumptions about her?
There was a little bit of media playing up, you know, for sensationalism, but still, I watched her testimony. I found that many times she contradicted herself. I think she was coached. I do not agree with you that she is really educated. I think that there's something lacking there in her.
But I'm not saying she's really educated. What I'm saying is, did the media perpetrate an uneducated African-American stigma?
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I would say they pointed out and maybe expanded on problems that were already there. They allowed us to see problems. And 2 seconds, the Katrina hurricane situation, everybody in America was like, oh my God, you know, there's ghettos in America. No, that's been there. Nobody is looking though. That girl pretty much exemplifies the African-American community, especially in those impoverished areas. We shouldn't be surprised. It should shock our consciousness.
Talking about not talking about it, Cindy, when she was asked by the prosecutors, so what did Trayvon say about Zimmerman? Called him something, I think ASS cracker or something. Mm-hmm. And she was asked, was that racist? Have you talked in your community? And she was like, no, that's not racist. Your thoughts on that?
Well, you have to define what racism is. And you can't say that racism can happen with a person that doesn't have power or
So-
privilege in a society. If she can't,
Wait. Most people, I think, would presume that cracker is a derogatory term towards a white person.
right, it's prejudice, and we are all prejudiced. Every
It's okay
single
to be
one of
prejudiced, but that's not.
it's not about
being
being
racist.
okay. It's about the power to exert some kind your privilege as a white person, and then use that to oppress someone. That's not something that
Or a
people of
black
color
person.
or a black person, a person of color. That's not something that people of color have. We don't have at the ready. Like, we can't go and tell police, like, go and arrest that person, and that they would just do that because a person of color told them to. Whereas white people, they have historically been able to do those types of things, and they have the privilege and the power, and they can go ahead and have those exerted upon someone else. So when you're taught, and this is like the academic definition of racism, you have to have privilege and power to exert it. It doesn't mean that it's different or good, and it doesn't mean that we don't all act in prejudiced ways. Is it as bad as being racist? Well, I mean, I think that's a comparison that's difficult to make, but I think that what's important is that we are all prejudiced. We need to understand that. You had just as many black people saying, "What's this little Mexican doing singing the national anthem?" And worse racist
Well, I think
things.
there you go. You look at Zimmerman. Zimmerman classifies himself as a Hispanic. I want to ask you this: how does it empower you and your community by making the assumption that white people are privileged?
Well, it's not an assumption. It is a fact. We know
According
that
to what?
according to the fact that people in privilege, white people, have had the opportunity to get educated.
Okay, so I can say to you, well, it depends how you define privilege, because you just told me it depends on how you define racism.
Right, but historically, white privilege has been defined as the ability to have access. So if your people were not slaves or were not, indigenous people who were put on reservations, and you had the access, or you weren't, like slaves that were brought to this country. I'm talking about the difference between indigenous slaves, like the Mexicans who were colonized, and black slaves who were brought over on boats. But the fact remains, we as people of color were not allowed to be in unions. We were not allowed to work at certain jobs. We were not allowed to be educated. We were not allowed to own land. We were not allowed to drive cars. There's certain things historically we were not allowed to do. And with all of those barriers, it makes it difficult for someone to have the access that white privilege gives people.
So I want to continue this conversation. I know you got something on the tip of your tongue you want to say. Hold that thought. Hold this thought. Stay right there where you're at. We're going to continue this conversation, hit a couple other hot topics as well. It's our Friday roundtable debate. As always, be sure and join our conversation. Go to our website, 630pov.com.
The views.
Welcome back to our Friday roundtable debate. Excuse me, with us, the Vice President of the People Press Project, Cindy Gomez-Schempp. Also, the President of the North Dakota Tea Party Caucus, Leon Francis. To both of you, thanks for sticking around. Leon, we were talking about racism in America. You had something on the tip of your tongue you wanted to share. What was that?
Well, the white privilege. I think we should move away from using that as, I don't know, a justification of African Americans, minorities in general, not being able to achieve some sort of power. You said a couple of minutes ago that if a black person said to a police officer, "Hey, you arrest that guy because of whatever reason," I believe if Juan Williams told a police officer, to arrest that guy because he stole my wallet, the police officer would do it.
But
what
we
it
know
is.
that doesn't necessarily happen. I mean,
I have had
see,
police officers arrest people on my word.
Right, but I'm talking about the police abuses. Like, for example, we had in the Fargo Police Department, there was a man that accused a business owner of stealing from him, and he was the one that was arrested for filing a police report. And it was determined by the courts in Fargo that was abusive behavior by the police department. That it was that they had put him in jail because of their own power that they could to stop him from filing a police report.
But you're then saying that was based on race.
It's based on the ability to exert your privilege as a white person and say,
But
you
see,
don't get
that's
to
a
file
police
a
person. You ever seen the jail experiment by Dr. Zimbardo
That's
at
a
Stanford?
blue.
That's a blue thing where if I
Right.
put on a policing, go watch the
But
jail experiment. I'm telling you, it's not
I
a
agree
white
with you.
brown thing.
It's no, but these things all are kind of interconnected. You can't disconnect.
I understand, but then you're
privilege.
saying it's only about race. I want to move on to Second Amendment.
No, I'm not.
Gabby Giffords was in town on Wednesday. We will come back to this. Believe me. She's out here saying, basically trying to stump, going, "Hey, Heidi Heitkamp, we need to have expanded background checks here on people that want to go buy guns." My question is, how is that going to stop gun deaths in America?
I don't think it is. I don't think that it is. I think that we're talking about it in a very disingenuous way. Again, we're very hypocritical. We want to have, you know, all expanded background checks or changing the size of the magazines. What is that going to really do?
I can leave that.
I believe that Gabby Gifford had to look at her situation, the life change in her state. You know, like, look at what's happened with Joe Arpaio. He can't run around, you know, collecting people and profiling anymore because the Supreme Court has said what you're doing is illegal. We've changed...
Profiling.
Right, profile, you can't do that. The court said you can't profile, you have to stop what you're doing. So he's been stopped within like the last week.
Well,
but there's a climate that we've created, that was created in the state of Arizona, in a lot of other states, of hatred. And that, we saw that reflected in what happened in the
Where's
state.
the hatred? Because people are
There
here
was-
illegally.
Well, I know, but we're
people
talking,
are
there is
destroying,
hatred.
I'm
There
not
is
denying
hatred.
there's hatred, but for you to sit there and make these extrapolations that, hey, there's this huge umbrella of hatred because people here illegally,
There was a
I don't
little
see it
girl
like
that was
Chris, how does it
murdered.
empower
there was a
you?
rancher that was murdered also, right on in Arizona.
Right, there's a lot of hatred and there's deaths.
But on
that are
both
result-
sides.
Correct. I'm not
Not
saying
as much on our side,
I'm not saying that
We're
there
trying
isn't
to-
deaths on both sides. It's a climate.
Right.
We're creating an environment. And she's saying we have an environment in this country where people are being murdered on a grand scale.
How do we
More
stop
so. How do we
illegal
stop that?
immigration, though?
Are we
How do
not
we
to the topic then?
how do we stop people from trespassing on private property to get to the United States illegally, committing crimes?
I think we
basically?
have to start by stopping the things that we do in other countries to destabilize them. Our free trade agreement destabilized the economics of that country to such a
That's a
degree.
Hillary Clinton deal.
That's true. It doesn't matter. I mean, yes, you want to name the villains. They're there. I'm not taking sides here. What I'm saying, it was dumb. It created instability in that country,
You don't
and
think
now we have
Mexico-
to deal with it.
You don't think that Mexico's
Mexico's puppet government
right.
that subscribes to whatever the United
so
States
how is that
tells them.
our problem?
It's not that we created it. If we create the problem, then it is our problem. Just like we created
I don't
Osama
believe-
bin Laden. We created that dude, and then we went and killed him. And we like to
We
do that.
created it.
Of course we did.
No.
We funded him.
That is a
We
topic for a
funded
whole
him.
nother
We
day.
gave him weapons. Of course we created him.
I want to ask you both this question. We're kind of beating down
Ever
this
heard of
path.
the
I
School
want
of the
one second.
Americas?
Here's a question I
Never
want to
heard
get
of the
to.
School
We
of
are
the
one day
Americas.
out of Independence Day here in America. What does Independence Day mean to you?
Well, on this day in 150 years ago, a college professor led a charge on a hill in Pennsylvania, Gettysburg, and it started this nation to the path of freedom that it's on now. That's what this holiday means to me. Independence Day. Independence from a tyrannical government.
Cindy, how about for you, Independence Day?
Oh, I think we have to look at it in the historical context. What was it? It was the colonies that came here, the first colonizers in this country, who were breaking ties with the crown. They were breaking ties just like the Spaniards who went to Mexico broke ties with the Spanish crown. That's really what it was like. We don't want to be taxed by this king anymore. We don't want to have to be under this crown to have them tell us how we can,
But I don't want a
spend our
cerebral
resources.
answer. I want to know, look, you're here, obviously, for a reason in this country.
I think that
What
we
does
have to have
Independence
more
Day mean to
cerebral
you?
answers because we don't think
You're
about the
giving me an
historical context.
Anybody can look up in a book. You've got a different experience of America than I do. I want to know, what does American independence, Independence Day mean to Cindy Gomez-Schempp?
I think that what independence means is that you have freedom. And I think that we don't think about what that is, what we want freedom from. We don't have that kind of freedom here in this country. I think most of your viewers
Have
would be
what type
shocked.
of freedom?
Freedom of thought, critical thinking. I mean, we don't have freedom of economy. We don't have the right to have the kinds of jobs that we want. We have a community that is living in an economic depression. These are not freedoms. And I think that what
You have
most
the
people would
freedom
be,
is, though, your
and we don't know
ability to-
that from a historical context. Look at the
We're
Statue
going
of
to,
Liberty.
unfortunately, have to wrap it up here. We're going to have you both back. Look, I know, time flies in TV. What do you want me to say to you? We
I got
love
like
having
2
you
words
guys.
in here.
We'll have you both back, believe me. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, love to know, hey, what does Independence Day mean to you and your family? Go to our website, 630pov.com. You can email us and text us. We'll be right back with a very special Feel Good Friday segment. Stay close.